Two abandoned puppies, barely clinging to life. A story that will leave you speechless. What happens in the middle completely changes the ending. Let us know which city you're watching from. Drop a comment below. And while you're here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and turn on notifications so you never miss any of our content. The night was eerily quiet. A thin mist hovered above the cracked asphalt of an abandoned highway, stretching endlessly into the darkness. The old road, long forgotten by travelers, was littered with debris, shattered glass, torn pieces of fabric, and empty cans rusting under the moonlight. The only signs of life came from the distant chirping of crickets and the occasional rustling of the wind through the overgrown weeds lining the pavement. But then, in the middle of the desolation, something moved. Two small figures huddled together near a pile of discarded trash, their fragile bodies barely visible under the dim glow of a flickering street lamp. They were nothing more than tiny mounds of fur, trembling from the cold and exhaustion. Their ribs protruded sharply against their thin skin, evidence of days, maybe even weeks, without proper food. Their eyes, dull and heavy with fatigue, reflected a silent plea for mercy. The smaller of the two lifted its head weakly, ears twitching at the distant sound of an approaching vehicle. A faint whimper escaped its dry throat, but it barely had the strength to make a noise. Its sibling nudged closer, offering what little warmth it could, as if sensing that hope was fading fast. At that moment, headlights pierced the darkness. The hum of an engine broke the eerie silence as a silver SUV made its way down the deserted road. Inside, Anna, a young veterinarian, was gripping the steering wheel, her eyes struggling to stay focused. It had been an exhausting day at the clinic, filled with emergency cases, back-to-back surgeries, and the growing stress of trying to keep her struggling business afloat. She sighed, adjusting her rearview mirror, her mind drifting to the bills piled up on her desk. She loved her work, but the weight of financial difficulties was becoming unbearable. Maybe she should take on more shifts. Maybe she should finally accept her parents' offer to help, even though the thought of relying on them stung her pride. Just as she was lost in thought, something caught her eye. A flicker of movement. She slammed the brakes. The SUV skidded slightly before coming to a stop. Her heart pounded in her chest as she peered through the windshield. On the side of the road, barely visible amid the trash, were two tiny, motionless figures. "No," she whispered. Already unbuckling her seatbelt, she pushed open the door, the cool night air hitting her like a wave. Her boots crunched against the gravel as she rushed forward, her stomach twisting with dread. As she knelt down, the smell of filth and sickness filled her nose. Up close, the puppies looked even worse. Mud caked onto their fur, their eyes half closed, their tiny bodies twitching with weakness. One of them let out a faint, pitiful whimper. Anna felt her throat tighten. She knew that look. She had seen it before in animals brought to her clinic too late. Animals that had given up. But these two, they were still holding on. Without hesitation, she gently scooped them up, pressing them close to her chest. Their bodies were ice cold against her skin, and she could feel their shallow, uneven breathing. "You're safe now," she murmured, though she wasn't sure if they could even hear her. Rushing back to her car, she carefully placed them on the passenger seat, grabbing a spare jacket from the back and wrapping them tightly. Her hands shook as she reached for her phone, her mind already racing through possible treatments. Severe malnutrition, dehydration, maybe an infection. They needed immediate care. As she sped off toward her clinic, one thought echoed in her mind. Who had left them here to die? And why? The tires screeched slightly as Anna's SUV sped down the empty road, cutting through the darkness like a silver arrow. Her pulse pounded in sync with the rhythmic hum of the engine, but her mind was focused solely on the two fragile lives she had just rescued. The puppies lay bundled together in her passenger seat, wrapped in her old fleece jacket. Their tiny chests rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths. Anna kept glancing at them between turns, biting her lip as she noticed how unresponsive they were. Their fur, now partially illuminated by the dashboard lights, was a patchy mix of dirt and grime, with fleas visibly crawling over their tiny bodies. Their ribs jutted out beneath their skin, and their paws twitched weakly, as if trapped in a feverish dream. "Hang in there, little ones," she murmured, tightening her grip on the steering wheel. Her clinic was only a few miles away, but every second felt like an eternity. She pressed harder on the gas, feeling the tension coil tighter in her chest. Flashes of past rescues flickered through her mind. Dogs and cats she had treated, some who had survived against the odds, others she had lost despite doing everything possible. She hated that feeling, the helplessness, the lingering pain of not being able to save them all. Not this time, she told herself. Finally, the familiar glow of her clinic's neon sign appeared in the distance, a beacon of hope against the night. She swerved into the parking lot, barely registering the crunch of gravel beneath her tires before throwing the car into park. Without wasting a second, she jumped out and ran to the passenger side, carefully scooping up the puppies in her arms. Their bodies were still far too cold. She could feel the slight tremors running through them, their little hearts beating weakly against her hands. Kicking the door open with her foot, she rushed inside. The clinic was quiet. She had closed hours ago, but she always kept the emergency lights on, just in case. The air smelled of antiseptic and faint traces of lavender from the candle she had forgotten to blow out earlier. Ignoring everything else, she hurried toward the examination table, gently laying the puppies down on the soft towel she kept for emergencies. She moved quickly, her training taking over. First, she checked their breathing. Still weak, but steady. Their gums were pale, a clear sign of dehydration. Their temperatures were dangerously low. She grabbed a heating pad from the supply closet, plugging it in and wrapping it gently around their frail bodies. Then, she filled a syringe with an electrolyte solution, carefully administering small drops onto their dry tongues. "Come on, babies, swallow," she urged softly, her free hand stroking their tiny heads. One of them made a faint, almost inaudible sound, a tiny whimper that sent a wave of relief through her. It was weak, but it was something, a sign that they were still fighting. She continued working, cleaning their fur as best as she could while monitoring their vitals. The fleas had to wait. Right now, survival was the priority. As she tended to them, a knot of anger formed in her stomach. Who had done this? Who had left them to die on the side of the road like trash? She had seen cases of neglect before, but something about this felt different. The puppies weren't just strays. They had been abandoned, dumped in the middle of nowhere with no chance of survival. Someone had made a choice to leave them there, and that someone needed to be found. As she wrapped the smallest puppy in a warm cloth and cradled it against her chest, she made a silent vow. She would fight for them, and she wouldn't stop until she found out the truth. Anna sat in the dimly lit clinic, exhaustion weighing on her shoulders as she monitored the two fragile lives resting before her. The puppies lay curled together on a heated pad inside a small recovery crate, their tiny bodies barely moving except for the faint rise and fall of their chests. Every few minutes, she would lean in, holding her breath, fearing the worst. A gentle knock on the glass door startled her. "Anna," a familiar voice called. It was Beatrice, her assistant and closest friend. She had probably seen the lights on and knew Anna was up to something. Anna hesitated for a moment before unlocking the door. Beatrice stepped inside, rubbing her arms against the night chill. Her wavy dark hair was tied up in a loose bun, and she still wore the light blue scrubs from her shift at the emergency vet hospital across town. Her sharp eyes landed on the crate instantly. "Oh no, what happened this time?" she asked, her voice soft but alert. Anna sighed, rubbing her temples. "I found them on the side of the road. They were barely moving. They wouldn't have made it through the night." Beatrice knelt beside the crate, her expression darkening as she examined the puppies. She reached out carefully, brushing a finger over the smaller one's head. The pup barely responded. "They're ice cold," she murmured. "I know," Anna said, frustration creeping into her voice. "I've been trying to warm them up and get fluids into them, but their bodies are so weak. I don't know if they'll pull through." Beatrice glanced at her, reading the tension in Anna's face. "But they're still breathing." Anna exhaled. "Yeah, barely." Beatrice stood up, crossing her arms. "We need to get more nutrients into them. They won't survive on electrolytes alone." Anna nodded. I was about to prepare some formula. They're too weak to latch onto a bottle, so I'll have to syringe feed them for now. Beatrice didn't need to be told twice. She walked to the supply cabinet, pulling out a can of emergency puppy milk replacer and a set of syringes. Within minutes, they had prepared the mixture, warming it to just the right temperature. Anna carefully picked up the weaker of the two puppies, cradling it in her hands. It was so light, almost weightless. The pup's fur was still matted with dirt, and its tiny paws barely twitched as she adjusted her grip. "Come on, sweetheart," she whispered as she gently inserted the tip of the syringe into its mouth. A single drop of formula touched the pup's tongue. At first, there was no reaction. But then, just barely, a tiny flicker of movement. A feeble attempt to swallow. Anna's heart clenched. "That's it," she encouraged, slowly squeezing another drop into its mouth. Beatrice watched in silence, her eyes flickering with cautious hope. It was a slow process, agonizingly slow. Every few minutes, Anna would switch to the other puppy, ensuring both received equal care. Each swallow felt like a small victory, each twitch of their bodies a sign that the fight wasn't over yet. Minutes turned into an hour. Finally, Anna leaned back, letting out a shaky breath. The puppies had taken in a little more than she had expected, not much, but enough to keep them going for now. Beatrice placed a reassuring hand on Anna's shoulder. "You did good," she said. Anna shook her head. "They're not out of danger yet." "No," Beatrice agreed, "but they're fighters. And so are you." Anna looked down at the tiny creatures nestled in the crate, their bodies still trembling, but just a little less lifeless than before. For the first time that night, hope began to take root in her heart. Anna wasted no time. She gently placed the weaker puppy on a heating pad inside a small incubator, adjusting the settings to bring its body temperature back to normal. The other pup, slightly stronger but still fragile, nestled into a soft towel on the examination table. Its eyes fluttered open briefly before exhaustion pulled it back under. Miguel stood by, adjusting the settings on his camera, his journalist instincts kicking in. "We need to tell their story in a way that makes people feel something. Not just a sad post. Something powerful, something they can't ignore." Anna nodded, rubbing her temples. "Then we have to show them everything. The filth on their fur, the bones pressing through their skin. People need to see what neglect really looks like." Camila, who had been setting up for the weaker pup, looked up. "But do you think people will care? I mean, the internet is flooded with sad animal stories. What makes this one different?" Anna turned to her, her voice firm. "Because these two shouldn't have survived. They were thrown away like garbage, yet they fought to stay alive. And we're not just asking for help. We're demanding justice." Miguel smirked. "Now that's a story." He lifted the camera to his shoulder and pressed record. Anna took a deep breath before speaking. The words flowed naturally, fueled by raw emotion. "This is Apollo and Zeus. They were found on the side of a deserted road, barely clinging to life. Someone left them to die. Someone who thought their lives didn't matter. But they do." She gently stroked the stronger pup's head as Miguel zoomed in on its frail body. "Right now, they're fighting to survive, but they need help. Apollo is severely dehydrated, and Zeus has a life-threatening infection. We're doing everything we can. But the truth is, our clinic is struggling. We can't afford their full treatment on our own." Anna swallowed the lump in her throat and looked directly into the camera. "If you've ever loved an animal, if you believe no life should be thrown away like trash, please help us. Every share, every donation, every voice that refuses to stay silent could be the difference between life and death for these two." Miguel slowly lowered the camera, his expression unreadable. "That was perfect." Anna exhaled, her hands trembling. She hadn't realized how much emotion she had poured into those words until now. Camila cleared her throat, blinking away tears. "I'll start setting up the donation links." Miguel checked his phone. "I'm posting the video now. Let's hope the world is listening." As the video went live, Anna sat beside the incubator, watching the smallest puppy's chest rise and fall. For the first time since finding them, she allowed herself to hope. The night at the clinic stretched on, heavy with both exhaustion and anticipation. Anna barely left the puppy's side, her heart clenching every time their tiny bodies shivered. Zeus, the weaker of the two, remained in the incubator, his breath shallow but steady. Apollo, wrapped in a soft blanket, stirred slightly, letting out a faint whimper. It was a sign of life, a fragile, flickering flame that Anna was determined to keep burning. Miguel sat on the couch in the corner, his laptop open as he monitored the response to their video. His fingers tapped anxiously against the keyboard, refreshing the page every few minutes. Camila paced the room, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Any updates?" Anna finally asked, her voice hoarse from fatigue. Miguel lifted his head, a slow grin spreading across his face. "Oh, you have no idea." He turned the laptop around, showing Anna the video statistics. In just a few hours, their post had been shared over 15,000 times. The comment section was overflowing with messages of support, prayers, and, most importantly, donations. Anna's breath hitched. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious," Miguel confirmed. "We've already raised over $5,000, and it's still climbing." Camila rushed over, peering at the screen. "People are actually donating? That fast?" Miguel chuckled. "Not just donating. Some are offering supplies, vet services, even foster homes if the puppies pull through." Anna's chest tightened with emotion. For the past few months, she'd been drowning in financial stress, wondering if she'd have to close the clinic. But now, strangers, people she'd never met, were reaching out, wanting to help. It was overwhelming. Her hands trembled as she clicked through the messages. One in particular caught her attention. "I work at a major animal welfare organization. We've been investigating cases of abandoned dogs in your area. Your video might be the evidence we need to take action. Please contact us." Anna's pulse quickened. "Guys, look at this." Camila leaned over her shoulder. "You think this is connected?" Anna hesitated, her mind racing. The puppies had been discarded like garbage. But what if they weren't the only ones? What if this was part of something much bigger? Miguel rubbed his chin. This could be a major lead. Maybe these weren't just abandoned pets. Maybe they were dumped for a reason. A sense of unease settled in Anna's gut. She had set out to save two helpless puppies, but now she might be uncovering something far darker. Outside, the night deepened. Inside the clinic, two tiny lives still clung to survival. And somewhere in the shadows, someone who didn't want the truth to come out was watching. The headlights cut through the darkness as Anna and Miguel drove down a desolate country road. The location the informant had given them, a supposedly abandoned farm, loomed ahead. The air was thick with tension. Miguel slowed the car as they approached a rusted metal gate, slightly ajar. Beyond it, they could see a few old buildings, some with boarded-up windows. It looked deserted, but Anna's gut told her otherwise. "Are you sure about this?" she whispered. Miguel exhaled sharply. "No, but we need to see for ourselves." He reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a small camera. "We get in, take some footage, and get out." Anna nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. They slipped through the gate and moved cautiously toward the barn. The smell hit them first, a putrid mix of urine, feces, and something worse. Inside, cages lined the walls, stacked on top of each other. Anna's stomach turned. Dogs, dozens of them, were crammed into the filthy enclosures. Some whimpered. Others lay motionless, their ribs protruding. Miguel started filming. "This is unbelievable." Then Anna spotted something that made her heart clench. A small cage in the corner held a mother dog, barely breathing, her puppies huddled around her. One of them had the same markings as the two she had rescued. "They came from here," she whispered. A noise outside made them freeze. Footsteps. Someone was coming. Miguel grabbed Anna's arm. "We have to hide." They ducked behind a pile of hay bales just as the barn door creaked open. Two men entered, their flashlights sweeping across the cages. One of them, a stocky man with a scar along his cheek, spoke first. "Boss says someone's been asking questions." The second man, taller and dressed in a black jacket, grunted. "Yeah, that reporter and the vet." Anna's breath hitched. They knew. Scarface kicked a nearby cage, making the dogs inside yelp. "They're getting too close. You know what to do." The taller man pulled out a gun. Miguel grabbed Anna's hand, his grip tight. They had to get out. Fast. Suddenly, a dog barked, a loud, desperate sound that echoed through the barn. The men spun around. Anna seized the opportunity. Run. They bolted for the door. Miguel shoved it open, and they sprinted toward the car. Behind them, the men shouted. A gunshot rang out. Anna's heart pounded as she threw herself into the passenger seat. Go, go, go. Miguel floored the gas, the tires screeching against the gravel. In the rearview mirror, the two men stood at the barn entrance, watching them disappear into the night. And one of them was making a phone call. They got away. But not for long. Miguel's hands were tight on the steering wheel, his knuckles white. Anna sat beside him, heart pounding, barely able to catch her breath. The road stretched ahead, endless and empty, but the tension in the air was suffocating. They knew about us, Miguel, she said, her voice shaking. They knew who we were. Miguel clenched his jaw. Yeah, and now they know we were there. Anna turned to look behind them, scanning the road. No headlights yet, but she knew it was only a matter of time before the men came after them. We need to go to the police, she said. Miguel let out a bitter laugh. And tell them what? That a random guy gave us a tip. We trespassed onto private property, and now some guys with guns want to kill us? Anna swallowed hard. We have footage. Miguel hesitated, then pulled to the side of the road. He grabbed his camera, rewinding the video, the images of suffering dogs, the inhumane conditions, and finally, the two men with weapons. It was all there. This is enough, Anna said firmly. This has to be enough. Miguel nodded. Then we go public. If we release this now, they won't be able to stop it. Just as he reached for his phone to upload the footage, a pair of headlights flared in the rearview mirror. Anna's stomach dropped. They found us. A high-speed pursuit. The SUV behind them accelerated, closing the distance fast. Miguel cursed under his breath. Hold on. He slammed on the gas, the tires screeching as they lurched forward. The SUV stayed right on their tail. Anna turned to look. The men inside weren't just trying to intimidate them. They were trying to ram them off the road. Miguel, they're going to. Before she could finish, the SUV swerved into their lane, smashing into the back of their car. Anna screamed as Miguel struggled to keep control. We need to lose them, she shouted. Miguel veered onto a smaller road, hoping to shake them off, but the SUV followed. The engine roared as he pushed the car to its limits, dodging potholes and curves. Then, up ahead, a fork in the road. Miguel made a split-second decision and turned sharply onto a narrow dirt path. The SUV skidded, trying to follow, but its bigger size made it harder to maneuver. For a moment, they had a lead. Then, disaster. The path ended in a dead end. A steep drop led into a wooded ravine below. Miguel hit the brakes, bringing the car to a stop just inches from the edge. Anna's breath was ragged. Now what? The sound of tires screeching behind them made her blood run cold. The SUV was blocking their only way out. The men stepped out, guns in hand. Scarface smirked. End of the road. A desperate escape. Anna's mind raced. There had to be a way out. Miguel whispered, "The footage. We have to protect it." Anna nodded. Without hesitation, she grabbed the memory card from the camera and slipped it into her shoe. Then, before the men reached them, she did the only thing she could think of. She threw the camera off the cliff. Scarface's smirk faltered. Big mistake. He raised his gun. Then, a deafening howl pierced the night. Anna barely had time to react before something massive leaped from the shadows. A dog. No, a wolf. It tackled Scarface, knocking him to the ground. The other man stumbled back in shock. Miguel grabbed Anna's hand. Run. They bolted into the woods as the chaos unfolded behind them. Anna's heart pounded. What just happened? Where had that wolf come from? One thing was clear. They weren't safe yet. And someone, or something, had just saved their lives. Anna and Miguel ran, their breaths ragged, the cold night air burning their lungs. The forest was dense, the branches clawing at their skin as they pushed forward. Behind them, the sound of gunfire cracked through the silence, followed by a guttural snarl. Anna's heart pounded. What had they just witnessed? A wolf attacking those men? Out of nowhere? It didn't make sense. Miguel pulled her behind a thick tree, gripping her shoulders. We can't just run blindly. We need a plan. Anna nodded, still catching her breath. Do you think that wolf? Miguel shook his head, eyes scanning the darkness. I don't know what that was. But it bought us time. Another gunshot echoed in the distance, followed by a scream. Then, silence. Anna swallowed hard. We need to get out of here before they realize we're gone. Miguel pulled out his phone, but there was no signal. Figures. Anna bit her lip. If we follow the road back, they'll see us. We need another way. Miguel nodded. Let's keep moving through the trees. Quietly. After what felt like an eternity, they stumbled onto a narrow dirt path winding deeper into the woods. Miguel stopped, squinting. There. A cabin. Anna followed his gaze. A small, weathered structure stood hidden among the trees, barely visible in the moonlight. Miguel hesitated. Could be abandoned, or someone could be inside. Anna's voice was barely above a whisper. And I don't know if that's good or bad. They had no choice. Staying out in the open was too dangerous. Miguel knocked softly. No response. He tried the handle. It creaked open. The inside was sparse but lived in. A small fireplace, a wooden table, a single chair. A bed with a tattered blanket. Miguel closed the door behind them. We'll rest for a few minutes, then figure out our next move. Anna sat down, her body aching. She reached into her shoe and pulled out the tiny memory card, the only proof they had left. Miguel exhaled. We need to get this to the press. Once it's out in the world, those guys can't stop us. Anna nodded, gripping it tightly. First, we need to make it out alive. A noise outside made them both freeze. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Miguel grabbed a rusty fire poker from the corner. Anna barely breathed. Then, the door creaked open. A figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the moonlight. Tall, broad-shouldered. His piercing eyes reflected something almost inhuman. But it wasn't just his presence that made Anna's skin prickle. It was the way the wolf from earlier stood beside him, its yellow eyes locked on her. The man's voice was deep, controlled. You have something dangerous, he said. And now, they'll never stop hunting you. Anna and Miguel froze. The man's presence filled the small cabin with an intensity that made the air thick. The wolf at his side stood still, eyes glowing in the dim light, watching them with an intelligence that sent chills down Anna's spine. Miguel tightened his grip on the fire poker. Who are you? The man stepped forward, closing the door behind him. Someone who wants those bastards gone as much as you do? Anna studied him. His face was rugged, his beard short and unkempt. His clothes were worn, like he had been living off the land. But what stood out the most was the calm way he moved, as if he had nothing to fear. Anna clutched the memory card. Do you know what they're doing? The dogfights, the breeding mills? The man's jaw tightened. I've been tracking them for years. His gaze shifted to the fire poker in Miguel's hands. You won't need that. Miguel hesitated, then lowered it. If you know about them, why haven't you stopped them? The man exhaled, crossing his arms. Because I don't have proof. His eyes flickered to Anna's hand. But you do. Anna swallowed hard. They killed Officer Reynolds. They tried to kill us. If they find us, they won't stop. The man nodded. That's why you need to move. Now. Miguel frowned. Move where? We're in the middle of nowhere. The man pulled out an old map, spreading it across the wooden table. There's an old railway line about 2 miles east. It runs through the mountains. No cameras, no road access. He traced a path with his finger. Follow it, and you'll end up near a gas station on Route 19. Get there, and you can call for help. Anna frowned. And what about you? The man looked at the wolf beside him, then back at them. I have unfinished business. Miguel narrowed his eyes. What kind of business? The man met his gaze, unblinking. They took something from me. A silence settled between them. Anna had a feeling that whatever it was personal. The man stepped toward the door. You have 1 hour before they realize you're gone. Get moving. Anna hesitated. Wait, what's your name? The man paused. Then, with a ghost of a smile, he answered, Logan. Then, He and the wolf vanished into the night. Anna and Miguel didn't waste time. Following Logan's directions, they cut through the dense forest, every crack of a branch making their hearts race. They were exhausted, but adrenaline pushed them forward. The thought of what would happen if they got caught was enough to keep them running. After an hour of hiking, Miguel spotted it first. There, the railway. Anna sighed in relief, until a familiar sound made her blood turn to ice. Engines. A black SUV rumbled onto a dirt road just a few yards away. The men in black coats stepped out, their faces cold. Miguel grabbed Anna's wrist. Run. But before they could move, a gunshot rang through the air. A sharp, burning pain shot through Anna's leg. She collapsed. Miguel turned in horror. Anna! The men closed in, and Anna's vision blurred as she realized they weren't getting out of this. Not alone. Pain seared through Anna's leg as she gritted her teeth, trying to stay conscious. Miguel dropped to his knees beside her, pressing his hands over the wound. Stay with me, Anna. The men in black coats approached slowly, guns raised. Their leader, a bald man with a long scar down his cheek, stepped forward. You've caused us a lot of trouble. Miguel clenched his fists. You're going to pay for what you did. The man smirked. No, son. You are. He nodded to his men. Finish them. Anna's heart pounded. This was it. Then, a low, menacing growl echoed through the trees. The men hesitated. Another growl, deeper this time. Then, out of the darkness, something moved. The wolf. It lunged from the shadows like a ghost, its powerful body slamming into the first man, sending him crashing to the ground. Before he could react, sharp teeth sank into his arm, making him scream. Chaos erupted. Gunfire rang out, but the wolf moved like a shadow, too fast to hit. The men scrambled, cursing, trying to fend it off. And then, a second figure emerged. Logan. He struck with precision, disarming one of the men with a single move. A knife flashed in the moonlight. Another man dropped, groaning. Miguel saw their chance. He grabbed Anna, pulling her toward the railway. Come on. Anna limped, her legs screaming in pain. Behind them, Logan fought like a man possessed. The wolf was relentless, darting between enemies, fangs bared. Scarface, the leader, snarled in frustration. He raised his gun, and then a loud crack split the air. A single gunshot. Scarface's body jerked. He stumbled, eyes wide, then collapsed. Standing behind him, gun in hand, Officer Reynolds. Anna gasped. But you... Reynolds lowered the gun, breathing hard. I faked my death. Miguel's mouth fell open. What? Reynolds nodded. They tried to kill me when I got too close. I let them think they succeeded. His eyes darkened, so I could bring them down. Anna's head spun. Logan, the wolf, the men, the shooting. Nothing made sense anymore. Then Logan spoke. It's over. The remaining men had either fled or lay unconscious. Miguel exhaled shakily. We need to get Anna help. Reynolds nodded. There's a safe house nearby. Let's go. Hours later, Anna lay on a couch, her leg bandaged. The painkillers dulled the agony, but not the weight in her heart. Reynolds, Logan, and Miguel sat across from her. Miguel spoke first. What now? Reynolds looked at Anna. That's up to you. Anna swallowed. We have the memory card. The proof. We can take them down. Logan nodded. But once we do, there's no going back. They'll come for you. A heavy silence filled the room. Then Anna spoke, her voice steady. Then we fight. The sun shone brightly over the animal sanctuary. Laughter filled the air as families played with the rescued dogs, many of them once victims of the same cruelty Anna had fought to stop. At the entrance, a plaque read, "In honor of those who fought for the voiceless." Anna watched as two healthy, playful dogs ran toward her. Her rescued pups, no longer weak, no longer afraid. Beside her, Miguel smiled, holding her hand. In the distance, a lone figure stood by the trees, Logan. He nodded once before vanishing back into the shadows. And Anna knew their fight had only just